If you're watching this channel, it's because you don't enjoy watching the world squander what Christendom built, but you want to do your part. And chances are you've heard me mention a great means by doing just that. Email made by and for Catholics. Check out fidei.email. That's FIDEI.email. Built for Catholic individuals, families, organizations, and groups. They're private, secure, and of course, they're Catholic. And they're offering 2 months off on your first year for an annual subscription if you enter the coupon code Return to Tradition without spaces. That's the name of this channel, without spaces, at checkout.
Most of us Catholics, traditionally minded Catholics who pay attention to the happenings in and to the Catholic Church, tend to keep our focus on Rome and North America and, to a lesser degree, Western Europe, and that's about it. Maybe we lately pay attention to Africa, where we have convinced ourselves for some reason that the church is super healthy there. Lots of people are coming into the faith, and so we don't have anything to worry about, especially since there are a few vocal bishops there who sound Catholic. Picture in Africa is a little more complicated than that, and they have the same problems of either Catholics attending Mass who aren't recognizably Catholic in the things they profess to believe, as, say, South America, plus you have Pentecostals and Presbyterian and other missionary groups trying to lead them out of the church and away from Christ to their false ways of claiming to know God. That's a real problem in Africa. Not a lot of people talk about it. But we tend to focus on those places. But there's a place in this world where that we should be paying attention to, and that's Nicaragua. Nicaragua is one of those classic heartland of Catholicism in the New World kind of places, where you would expect the faith to be thriving, plenty of priests and missionaries and other things, and the faith to be much more front and center in the daily life of people. And in Nicaragua, compared to the United States, that's absolutely true, comparatively speaking. But in the last few years, there has been a crackdown on the church in Africa by the secular authorities. They are essentially trying to erase Catholicism from public life, and they're doing it using overt means. We now have, unfortunately, the latest turn in this story that was widely ignored by people, except for, weirdly enough, the National Catholic Reporter, who deserves credit where it's due for reporting on this. So the headline from them is, Women's Congregation Hit Hard in Latest Crackdown in Nicaragua. So while the rest of the church is undergoing an internal crisis, the enemies of the church outside of the church are on the march. There has been a long-standing crackdown on the faith in that country, with bishops and priests being locked up by the dictator there and foreign priests expelled. This crackdown is the latest in that, targeting women religious. Again, this has been going on for years there, and I've kind of reported on it here and there. But we're talking about a situation where any priest or bishop who even mentions what's going on in that country may disappear, may be locked up. This is one of those places in the world where the reason that bishops wear red is something they have to take very, very seriously. So please pray for all the priests and bishops and nuns you're about to hear about in this story, because unfortunately, they desperately need your prayers. From the article, quote, all but 4 of the 26 Catholic congregations recently stripped of their legal status in Nicaragua were women religious, but a Nicaraguan sister told Global Sisters Report August 27th that even the latest large-scale state crackdown won't shake their resolve to help people and provide them hope. She also urged Catholics outside Nicaragua to tell others about their plight. Those of us here, because of the situation, we can't say anything. We can't publish anything. We absolutely cannot share any information the way a normal person would in a normal country, she told Global Sisters Report. But that's something the rest of the world can do. Global Sisters Report is withholding the sister's name for her safety and that of her congregation. The secular actions have the potential to negatively affect the health of Nicaraguans, their access to food and other services for the elderly and poor, which many women religious provide via their ministries, not to mention their contributions to Catholic schools that now have been taken over by the secular authorities, she said. But women religious will remain with the Nicaraguan people no matter what happens, and won't allow anyone to take away the faith and hope that remains, she said. What's most important right now is to create a network of solidarity among us and be close to one another and help with whatever the other congregations may need, she said. And another sentiment that has arisen is to want to remain firm in hope and to live, as we all say, day by day, no matter what happens, until when we can no longer do so. The women's congregations were among 1,500 nonprofits stripped of their legal status in a single day. Among them, Company of Mary, Discalced Carmelites, Oblates of the Sacred Heart of Jesus, Trappist Sisters, Augustinians, Sisters of Charity of the Good Shepherd, as well as a congregation of Franciscans. The August 19th closures are part of the ongoing attacks on Nicaragua's religious and civic life from the increasingly totalitarian regime of President Daniel Ortega and his wife, Vice President Rosario Murillo. When legal status is taken away, the state freezes the organization's bank accounts and seizes their properties, the U.S. State Department said in a 2024 report, which also points out that 3,600 other nonprofits in Nicaragua have undergone a similar fate since 2018. Nicaraguan officials said August 19th in the government publication La Gaceta that the nonprofits had, quote, not met their obligations and accused them of not reporting financial information. Among them were Baptist, Pentecostal, and evangelical groups, but also organizations promoting arts, sports, and culture and indigenous identity, end quote. Like I said at the start of this is just the latest episode. It's been going on for years, as you can see there. This problem has weirdly flown under the radar for a lot of Catholics, and it's easy these days to see how that can happen. We've been, in America, wrapped up in our own political processes that are ongoing in this country, but this has been going on since 2018 at least, if not earlier than that. 3,600 nonprofits essentially abolished by their state. And look, I'm not exactly a fan of nonprofit organizations in the United States. Many of them aren't exactly the best actors in the cultural environment, working actively to undermine the country. But when you start seeing things happen at this scale, and they start going after nuns, ones who look like nuns, who act like nuns in every way that we would want them to, you've got a problem. You've got a massive problem here. And to give you an idea how this isn't a news story even this year, and how this has gained some secular attention, even though still not a lot of widespread reporting, check this out from this past February, as reported by the Associated Press with this headline. Nicaragua's crackdown on Catholic Church spreads fear among the faithful, there and in exile. Interesting that it would also involve those who are in exile. Now, those in exile would be afraid for their families, their friends back home, those sorts of things. But as we've seen with some other groups who have legitimate reasons to leave their homes and come to the West in some places, sometimes the problems at home are follow them because the people they flee from send their own agents there to keep an eye on the local populations of those folks. We've seen that numerous times with the, we'll say, those who Cardinal Zen stands up against. Seen that here in America and in Canada. Keep that in mind. Ortega's not the type to necessarily take that tool out of his toolkit if it means manage to clamp down on things in his country. From the AP article, quote, 19 priests kicked out of the country, dozens of incidents of harassment and church desecrations, rural areas lacking worship and social services. The situation for Catholic clergy and faithful in Nicaragua is only worsening in 2024, according to exiled priests, lay people in the Central American country, and human rights advocates. The fear of the ongoing crackdown by President Daniel Ortega on the Catholic Church in particular, but not sparing evangelicals, has become so pervasive that it is silencing criticism of the authoritarian government and even mentions the repression from the pulpit. All the time the silence gets deeper, said Martha Patricia Molina, a Nicaraguan lawyer who fled to the United States. Her work recording hundreds of instances of church persecution and recently won her an International Religious Freedom Award from the U.S. State Department. If it's dangerous to pray the rosary in the streets, it is exceedingly so to report attacks, Molina said. Many priests believe that if they make reports, there will be more reprisals against the communities. We as lay people would like for them to speak, but the only alternatives are cemetery, prison, or exile. She counted 30 church desecrations in the past year, only a few reported to authorities. Recently, she heard of a priest who went to the police after a theft in his church, only to be cursed at and told he was a suspect. Life in Nicaragua is hell because surveillance is brutal. You can't say anything that's against the government, said an exiled priest. Like him, most exiles interviewed for this story spoke to the Associated Press on a condition of anonymity out of fear of retribution against their families or communities in Nicaragua. People now keep their heads down as they wonder. If they do this to the priests, what will they do with us? The clergyman added. He was barred from returning to Nicaragua, where he, like many priests and nuns, drew the secular authorities' ire for providing shelter and first aid to those injured when the dictator's rule violently repressed massive civic protests in 2018. End quote. Yes, the church is under attack in what many still believe is the heartland of Catholicism in the New World. Faith isn't thriving there. The faith is now head to head facing off with what looks like its own little mini softer version of Diocletian. That's what's happening there. And I use Diocletian on purpose because the situation is getting worse there. And the man behind it all doesn't look like he's going anywhere anytime soon. It won't take much to go from where they are now to just trying to erase the faith entirely using, we'll call it, traditionally Roman methods. That isn't that far off, and I know that sounds hyperbolic. One of the more eye-opening things about this is that there are apparently few, if any, charitable organizations started to fundraise to help the church there very quietly. It just hasn't happened. Nothing that I could find anyway. If you know of the name of one, send me an email and I will do a follow-up with this for ways that you, the audience, can help. Because as Catholics, we do have a responsibility to help other Catholics in places like this. So at least, for the very least, please pray for the church in that country, that they may be able to withstand these attacks and that God will see fit to provide Nicaragua with better leadership soon, one that is not openly hostile to the faith. Let me know what you think of this story in the comments, please. Hit like and subscribe if you haven't. It certainly helps. So does sharing this on social media. That helps too. And as always, pray for the church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.